Mark Harmon. What if the guy playing the toughest agent on television was actually running from a fire in his own front yard? A literal one, with a kid trapped inside a burning car. Stick with me, because the story behind this quiet Hollywood legend is a lot wilder and a lot more human than the calm face he always showed on camera. Mark Harmon spent decades as one of the most trusted faces on TV and one of the most guarded people in the business. Almost nobody knew what was actually going on behind that steady, unbothered expression. So let's pull back the curtain a little. First, rewind to the late 1980s. Mark's older sister, Kristen Harmon, had lived the kind of life tabloids dream about. Back in 1963, she married rock and roll royalty, Ricky Nelson, and for a while, it really did look like a fairy tale. But touring life is brutal, and Kristen ended up in a long, painful fight with addiction. Then, in 1985, Ricky died in a plane crash, and everything Kristen had left to hold on to started slipping away too. Caught right in the middle of all that was her young son, Sam Nelson, just 12 years old and living in a home that had become genuinely unsafe. Mark watched this happening to his own nephew and couldn't just stand by. He talked his sister into rehab, and because she trusted him, she actually went. But recovery isn't instant, so in 1987, Mark and his wife, Pam Dauber, made a huge decision. They filed for custody of Sam. Here's the thing though. What should have stayed private turned into a full-blown tabloid feeding frenzy. Reporters got hold of the court case and splashed every painful detail across headlines. The addiction, the psych evaluations, the family's rawest moments, all out in public. Mark was horrified. He realized the legal fight meant to protect Sam was actually hurting him more. So Mark did something a lot of people wouldn't have the guts to do. He dropped the custody case, let Kristen keep custody, and settled for visitation rights instead. The lawsuit ended, but the damage to his relationship with his sister took years, maybe decades, to even partly heal. That whole ordeal taught Mark a brutal lesson about what happens when your private life becomes public entertainment, and it shaped literally everything that came after. Now, to understand why Mark valued privacy so fiercely, you've got to go back to his childhood in Burbank, California. His dad, Tom Harmon, wasn't just a well-known guy. He was a genuine American legend. Tom won the Heisman Trophy in 1940, flew combat missions in World War II, and later became a famous sports broadcaster. Impressive, right? Except at home, Tom ran a tight ship. Perfection wasn't a goal, it was the baseline. Mark once said his dad raised him hard, meaning nothing was ever handed to him. Growing up like that, love sort of got tangled up with achievement. Mess up, and you weren't just disappointing your dad, you were disappointing a legend. So Mark learned early to keep his feelings locked down tight, and just push through. His mom, Elise Knox, had been a well-known 1940s film actress, and she taught him something else important: how carefully you have to manage what the world sees of you. Between the two of them, Mark grew up watching image and reality get carefully separated, long before he ever thought about acting himself. And here's the irony. Stepping out from under his father's shadow didn't happen in Hollywood. It happened on a football field. In 1972, Mark transferred to UCLA and, against a lot of doubters, became the starting quarterback almost immediately. He ran a tricky offense called the wishbone, and in his very first game, he helped pull off a massive upset over the defending national champions, Nebraska. Over 2 seasons, his team went 17-5. And get this, while he was out there getting hit every Saturday, he was also graduating with honors and winning a National Scholar Athlete Award. Brains and toughness, not one or the other. But football beats up your body, and Mark took hit after hit without ever complaining. That same stoic training from childhood kicking in. Then, when everyone expected him to go pro, he shocked everybody and walked away from football completely to try acting instead. Picture that gap. 1 week you're a college football hero, the next you're working construction and roofing jobs just to pay rent, while getting rejected at audition after audition. He treated every single casting call like a football drill. Show up early, stay humble, work hard, don't complain. That mindset is basically what got him through the lean years. Now here's where things get genuinely intense. It's January 1996, a cold night in Brentwood. A car with two teenage boys inside loses control, smashes into a wall, flips over, and catches fire. One kid manages to crawl out. The other, 16-year-old Colin Specht, is trapped upside down inside the burning wreck, and the smoke is getting thicker by the second. People on the street are just frozen, terrified the whole thing is about to explode. Pam sees the fire from their house and starts screaming for help while calling 911. But Mark doesn't wait around for firefighters. He runs to his garage, grabs a 12-pound sledgehammer, and sprints toward the flames with zero protective gear. He smashes the window, reaches into the fire, and physically drags Colin out of his seatbelt and away from the car, moments before the whole thing goes up completely. And after doing something that heroic, Mark refused every interview request. He wouldn't go on talk shows, wouldn't take credit, just kept insisting the story should be about the injured kids recovering, not about him. He later admitted something pretty raw. If that car had exploded a few seconds earlier, his own wife and kids could have lost him that night. That kind of moment changes a person's priorities permanently. Which brings us to Mark's marriage, genuinely one of the most private in Hollywood history. He and Pam married quietly in 1987, right around the time of that painful custody battle. And they made a pact. Their home life would stay completely off-limits to the public. Pam was riding high off her fame from a hit sitcom, but she chose to step back from acting to raise their two sons, Sean and Ty, largely out of the spotlight. No interviews about each other, no red carpet photos of the kids, no social media accounts at all, for decades. When tabloids invented divorce rumors or health scares, Mark and Pam just said nothing. And weirdly, that silence worked. The rumors would eventually just fizzle out because there was nothing to feed them. Sure, it cost them industry connections and invitations they never went to, but it meant their kids got something close to a normal childhood. Nearly 40 years married in an industry famous for the opposite. That's not luck, that's a strategy. Of course, none of that privacy could shield him from what came next. The pressure cooker that was working on a massive, long-running TV drama, playing a role that made him both the lead actor and an executive producer. 24 episodes a year, 16-hour days, for 2 decades, that grind wears people down and shortens tempers. Things boiled over in October 2016 over, of all things, Mark's dog. The dog had been on set for years without incident, but during some roughhousing with a crew member, it got spooked and bit the person's face, requiring stitches. Co-star Polly Perrette was understandably upset and didn't want the dog back on set. Mark disagreed, and that disagreement created a rift between the two lead actors that never really closed. Production actually split their filming schedules, so the two almost never had to be on set together, using editing tricks to make it look like they were still sharing scenes. After Polly eventually left the show, she went public with serious allegations, including claiming Mark had physically intimidated her. Mark, true to form, said absolutely nothing publicly. He let the story sit there, unanswered, which meant the controversy lingered a lot longer than it probably needed to. By his late 60s, Mark's body was clearly telling him something. Fans started noticing he looked thinner, more tired on screen, and social media exploded with rumors he was secretly seriously ill. The real story was less dramatic, but still rough. Years of physical grind, plus a difficult recovery from knee surgery. The network, understandably nervous about losing their biggest star, kept begging him to re-sign. Mark felt torn, knowing hundreds of crew jobs depended on the show continuing. Eventually, in 2021, he wrote himself a quiet exit, his character heading off to Alaska for peace and closure, and stepped away. Retirement didn't mean relaxation, though. Grief kept finding him. In 2016, the show's longtime showrunner, Gary Glassberg, died suddenly in his sleep at 50. A massive personal loss for Mark, who'd built the show alongside him for years. Then in late 2023, his longtime co-star, the beloved Scottish actor David McCallum, passed away at 90. Mark, being Mark, didn't do a big public tribute tour, He just said, simply, that he'd been in awe of David from the day they met, and then grieved privately. But here's a nice twist to close things out. In 2024, Mark came back to the franchise he loved. Not in front of the camera this time, but as narrator and executive producer of a prequel series. And get this, the idea actually came from his own son, Sean Harmon, who wanted to explore the character's earlier, darker years. Father and son pitched it together, and Mark ended up personally mentoring the young actor cast in his old role, Austin Stowell, helping him understand the character from the inside out. These days, Mark splits his time between producing and writing. Teaming up with retired real-life federal agent Leon Carroll Jr., he's written a string of naval history books, with new ones released in 2023, 2024, and 2026. And otherwise, he's just living quietly with Pam, being a grandfather, staying about as far from the spotlight as a person that famous possibly can. So here's the real takeaway. Mark Harmon's biggest wins were never really about fame or ratings. They were about protecting the people he loved, even when it cost him professionally, even when the whole world wanted a piece of his private life. That's a pretty rare thing in show business. What part of his story hit you the hardest? Drop a comment and let me know. And hey, if you enjoyed this, smash that like button, subscribe for more stories like this one, and I'll catch you in the next video.